I am a computer consultant. My main function is to install small office systems and make sure all the components work together as a unit. I am good at what I do. The hours are erratic, but the income is excellent. My name is Grady Traynor. About 5 years ago, I met a charming little office clerk while doing my job. Her name was Brenda, and I liked her as soon as I saw her. I think the reason I liked her was that she laughed at my silly jokes and seemed interested in me as a person. My social life was non-existent. Like most guys in my area, I had very little social skills, almost none. I had never really dated, and frankly, I was hesitant to even try. The work I was doing in her office took about a week, and before it was completed, I got brave enough to ask her out. It was my first real date. Needless to say, about 6 months later, we were married. She was about 6 years younger than me, but I didn't see that as a problem. We had a bit of awkward sex before we got married. I was somewhat relieved that she had some experience because I had nothing to bring to the party. She had short, dark hair and brown eyes. I liked her breasts because they were perfectly round and didn't sag one bit. Brenda wasn't thin. She had a well-defined waist and nice rounded hips. Our sex life continued to improve over the next few years. She wasn't shy about telling me what she liked, and I was a diligent student. Unfortunately, I guess I wasn't such a good husband. Between my field work and the baggage I brought home every night, I lacked romance. She never said anything, but I felt I was falling behind on my marital duties. I usually wasted some time and tried to catch up, but sometimes I stumbled. Okay, I admit it. It was my fault. I wasn't as good a companion as I should have been. I should have entertained her more. I should have pampered her and brought her little gifts to show her how much I loved her. I did love her, but unfortunately I lacked the charm and social skills that all pretty boys had. I figured I couldn't pay enough attention to prevent problems, so I would just have to fix them ex post facto. Brenda would fall into one of her gloomy moods and then suddenly become cheerful and full of life. I realized that I hadn't done anything to cheer her up, so it must have been something else. I love puzzles of any kind. For me, this was a puzzle that needed to be solved. Fortunately, my work situation gave me a lot of flexibility. The first time I just followed her for a few days. Brenda didn't drive, and all the places she went were within walking distance. That was the nice thing about living downtown. On the third day, she took a basket and went to the open market. She bought a few things and then turned down a side street. I walked back about half a block and watched her walk toward the third house on the left. It was a small 2-story house. She didn't knock, just walked in. I waited for about 15 minutes and then said to myself, "What the hell?" The door was unlocked and I went right in. Her basket was standing by the door. There was some noise upstairs, so naturally I went upstairs. Brenda was naked riding a young guy with blonde hair and embossed abdominal muscles. I stood in the doorway for a long time and watched. She was bouncing up and down like crazy and looked like she was having a good time. He was just lying there, but his stomach was clenched. He had abs, just like in the commercials. I was really upset because my wife was cheating on me, but I didn't get turned on. They just kept doing the same thing, and it was getting a little boring, so I went downstairs. I probably could have watched longer, but there didn't seem to be any point. While they were finishing up in the bedroom, I carefully wiped my fingerprints off the stair railing and the doorknob. I went to the kitchen and found a pair of rubber gloves and a good carving knife. I waited in the hallway. After about half an hour, Brenda came downstairs, got her basket, and left. I went upstairs to thank the guy for taking care of my wife. The next morning at breakfast, I couldn't stand it. "Oh, that's interesting, Brenda. A guy was stabbed to death in his bedroom on Court Street yesterday. I think we'd better start keeping the doors locked. The police don't know who did it, but they're looking for a dark-haired girl who visited him regularly. They've got fingerprints, but nothing to match." "Wow. What was his name? Did we know him?" "I don't know anyone who lives on Court Street, but his name was Rich Mitchell. Do you know him?" She hesitated for a few moments. "No, I don't know him. I don't know anyone who lives on Court Street either." "Well, I gotta go." I kissed her lightly on the cheek, heading for the door. I stopped for a moment and looked back. She reached out and grabbed the paper and started reading very carefully. I chuckled to myself as I left for work. For about 5 months, things were good at the Traynor house. I tried to make Brenda happy, but she never showed as much enthusiasm in the bedroom as she did with Rich. My feelings were hurt. I could give her everything in the world, but I just didn't have what it took to turn her on. Then the cheerful glow reappeared. About a week later, I was reading the paper at breakfast. "Oh my God, Brenda, here's another guy who was killed nearby yesterday. He was working under his car behind Chestnut Street, and the jack slipped. The car fell on his chest and crushed him. You didn't know Simon Phillips, did you?" "Who?" "Simon Phillips. It says here he worked at Burke's Chemical." Brenda seemed to stammer a little. Finally, she answered, "No, I don't know anyone by the last name of Phillips at all." She set her coffee down and walked into the living room. I headed for the door, and she sat there. "Are you okay, Brenda?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to figure out what I'm going to do tonight. What did you want for dinner tonight?" "How about chili?" I could tell she was upset, but she didn't know what to do. For about 6 months, everything went back to normal. I wasn't getting the crazy, passionate love I knew she could give me. I had come to terms with the fact that I was just a meal ticket and a roof over my head. I knew now that there would never be anything more than that in our relationship. There was another revelation at breakfast. "Brenda, did you see this in the paper? The guy got drunk at the Black Angus bar. You know, the one by the Maiden Creek Canal. Looks like he fell into the canal and hit his head on something. They found him floating in the water yesterday morning. His name was Jacob Kraft. There must be a bunch of guys around here who have had some bad luck, don't you think?" My wife gave me a very strange look. It was a mixture of fear and awe. She sat perfectly still, barely breathing. It was like she was afraid to even move. I didn't know anyone named Jacob Kraft, honestly. For some reason, she was terrified. It took her a while to put 2 and 2 together. I had no idea what she was going to do next. "I have to go to work, honey. You have a great day." She sat as if paralyzed as I walked out the door. The next 4 years were better. She turned into a Stepford wife. Unfortunately, the sex was mediocre. She did everything I asked her to do and seemed deathly afraid to deny me anything. There was rarely any fighting in our house at all. Meanwhile, I was raking in money and hiding it in unusual places. She knew nothing about our finances. The only thing she did was sign a blank tax form every year. She decided to get a job, and I supported that decision. Brenda ended up working for one of the local insurance companies. From what she said, the job consisted of moving paper from one basket to another. Some other functions were performed, but I wasn't interested in that, so I don't even remember what it was. For the first few weeks, it seemed like everything was fine. She was very excited about bringing home her first paycheck from her new job. She seemed a little disappointed when I told her it all belonged to her and she could spend it as she saw fit. She wanted to feel like she was contributing in some way. That feeling quickly went away when she got home from her first shopping trip. It turned out that the rose had lost its color after about 6 weeks. "What happened, Brenda? How did this great job turn to crap?" "It's my boss, Victor. Nothing I do is good enough for him. I'm just as good, if not better, than most of the other girls, but all he does is berate me. I hate to see him coming. I hate him. Things like this happen at a new job. Hang in there a little longer and see how it goes." That got her a frown and a disapproving grunt. Well, that didn't make it any better. It seemed that Victor had singled her out for some reason. According to her, the harder she tried, the more reasons she found to criticize him. I noticed that her anger at him had changed somewhat. She was still upset about her predicament, but she was also spending a lot of time in deep thought. This was unusual for Brenda. She could sit for hours without saying anything. She was sad or depressed, just thinking. I sensed that a new game was being played, and I became interested. Overnight, there was a change. Brenda no longer complained about Victor. She didn't talk about him at all. Conversations about her work became more general. The only time we talked about her job, she asked me if I could work a little overtime. I found that very interesting, so I quickly agreed. A few weeks later, not only was Brenda not complaining, she seemed to be enjoying her job. She would come home from work late, but in a good mood. It was time to sort things out. Victor Morrison was an ordinary middle-aged guy. He wore bifocal glasses and had a bald spot. He wasn't too tall and seemed a little overweight. From what I could tell, Victor was a nice guy, not the ogre Brenda had portrayed him to be. Almost all of the staff seemed to like him. It didn't take long to realize that Brenda and Victor were the only ones working overtime, and they didn't have much work to do. All the previous guys Brenda had dated had been handsome muffin studs. Victor didn't fit that model. I smiled, thinking of my wife's audacity. Brenda was trying to figure out how to fix a problem she had encountered at work. She remembered what happened to the guys she slept with behind my back. She stopped doing it, but realized it would be a good way to get rid of Victor and make her life easier. If she had an affair with Victor, she knew I would find out and Victor would be a corpse. My smart little wife was wagging the dog. I was so proud of her. Now that I knew what was going on, I had to plan countermeasures. The only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would happen to Victor. I felt like a scorpion being carried across the river by a frog. I knew I was going to have to do something, and I hoped I wouldn't drown in the end. I decided to let things percolate for a while. A few weeks later, I came home and found Brenda sitting in the living room crying. "Okay, Brenda, what's going on? Why are the waterworks leaking?" "Oh, Grady, I screwed up. I screwed up really badly, and I'm afraid of what might happen. Please don't be mad at me, Grady. You have to help me." "Slow down. Take your time and tell me exactly what's bothering you." I handed her some tissues, and she calmed down a bit. Finally, she started talking, slowly and quietly. "When I started working, I hated my boss, Victor. I hated him so much I wanted him dead. I remember what happened to the guys I had sex with after we got married. I decided it would be best if I didn't have sex with other guys anymore because I didn't want to make you angry. That was fine until I got a new job. Am I thinking right, Grady?" "Sort of." "Keep going, sweetie." "Well, I thought if I started having sex with Victor, he'd disappear too, and my problem would be solved. But nothing happened. You didn't do anything. I was worried that you didn't love me anymore. I was sure you knew, and every day I expected you to save me. But nothing ever happened." "I'm sorry, Brenda. What do you want me to do?" She's crying again. "This is a big problem, Grady. I don't want you to do anything right now. I think I've fallen in love with Victor. It's amazing how things work out. Turns out Victor felt the same way about Brenda. They both had a terrible dilemma about what to do with me. I was ready to move on. Brenda had been fun for a while, but I never considered her my lifelong companion. I was still looking for a woman like that. She was thrilled when I told her that we could get a divorce with no problem and she and Victor could be together. I was impressed with the plan she came up with and happy that I was able to bring it to a satisfactory conclusion. Tomorrow I leave for Dublin. I have a 3-year project ahead of me and I look forward to finding a replacement for Brenda there.